Welcome to Modern Mythology, a podcast that explores the many intersections of story and system. In every episode, we will discuss some facet of how RPGs function as modern myths, providing a shared canvas for creativity and the collaborative discovery of new worlds. For more information about this episode, articles, or links to our other related projects, visit modernmythology.net. Episode 2. Collective stories getting on the same page with Session 0 buy-in, and we begin our exploration of horror RPGs with Blades in the Dark actual play.
Well, I wanted to talk about the idea of like myth-making, like RPGs being myth-making, kind of unpack exactly what it means by that, and also get rid of the kind of grandiose sense, because most people kind of like, we're making myths together, and like, you know, like we're talking about like a goblin who's afraid of the dark or whatever, you know, like a character is like, it's kind of hard to kind of bring those things together and recognize like kind of what we're doing. What I mean by myth in general is just a collective story that people use to orient themselves. And it's kind of dawned on me first when I was, you know, looking back on years of role playing and thinking about the friends I've made and so on, and kind of like all the shared stories, you know, that you build with people when you're playing these, you know, quote unquote fantasy or made up characters, or like what is that? Like when you've been, you know, like you meet someone through playing a character that you've made up, and you have these stories that no one else has it's kind of privy to, really. Yeah. When you're playing with people in a private setting, like you're kind of just making the story for each other, you know? So does that change the game? That's something else I kind of think about a bit. But,
and I think part of what becomes interesting is like that trope, right? Of where game designers and manufacturers have continually like complained about players who like walk up to them and be like, like, can I tell you about my character? Like that's been a thing. And then, you know, many well-thinking manufacturers are like, yes, you know, like really embrace that idea. But there is this need to retell those stories. I think, you know,
and relive.
Relive those stories. Do any of you have like a favorite RPG moment?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have so many, but part of it is always there's so much context. When I try to tell the stories about it, even when I'm like, talking to you about it or whatever, I'm like, and this person was, you know, this character was really important, but it's like, but then I have to explain the 10 sessions before that. It's like jumping in the middle of Game of Thrones and like talking about why Rhaenyra is, you know, important in this scene or whatever, you know, like.
Right. Right. One character shooting another character on the toilet with a crossbow doesn't have quite the same gravity unless you
exactly.
But
that is the point of playing an RPG, right? Which is that you do have this longevity, you have this experience, you're all interacting together. There's this story that unfolds. One of my favorite ones is we were playing a cyberpunk RPG in the 1990s, and it just fit the time. I mean, you know, there was Predator out, there was Aliens out, there was Terminator out, and we're now living in the Terminator time. We're running through this space, and we failed to check, and all of us tumbled down an elevator shaft and died. Total party kill.
That's it. That's old school. Be like, oh, sorry, you guys
failed to check. But it was brilliant. And to this day, when I see those guys 20 years later, we all laugh about it. We still talk about that moment where we're all like, what?
My favorite RPG story, interestingly enough, was not a game I was involved in. It was a game I got involved in later. But it was this mixed group of friends. They were all college friends, and they had been playing this long-term D&D campaign. And at some point in time, they got to fighting Baba Yaga. And they had this long, drawn-out, multi-session battle with Baba Yaga, and you know, and of course, you know, D&D. That can be a lot of time, you know.
Sure.
And there was one. Basically, everyone had died, right? And when the dust had cleared, there was one character left who was like, you know, at her last few hit points. And so she had a ring of wishes. And so she's like, oh, I could use this.
That's the thing to pull out the last
the
minute.
party bag,
That's
right?
very D&D.
Right? Right. It was like, I'm sure it was on her character sheet, right? It's like, oh, by the way, what? You know? So she's like, I'm going to use my ring of wishes to bring everybody back. And the table just erupted with everybody shouting, like, you know, everything to her. And she's like, shut up. I'm doing this myself. Blah, blah, blah. She's like, I want everybody to come back with full hit points and abilities. The GM, like, you know, because it was a miniatures game, like stands up all the characters and stands up all the young.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's great.
So, yeah. And, you know, I do think that's a myth. I do think, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
with that group of people.
yeah.
You know?
Do you find, like, I think gravitas is important, though. I think that there has to be a level of seriousness. I know, Jamie, and I'm not to, you know, age ourselves in terms of like when we're recording this, but you're watching Chaos now. I know
Great.
you love it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed
You
that.
started watching. Have you watched it yet, Mark?
I stand in
Chaos.
Yeah.
And
Jeff Goldblum's Zeus was enough to sell me, but
oh right, you had me in Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
You had me in Jeff Goldblum. Do we feel like Jamie, I would say you generally fall in the camp of irreverence.
by most people's standards, probably.
Right. And where, like, I'm a little bit more of a purist, you know, when it comes to that stuff. So it takes me, like, Iron Man 3. It took me a minute to, like, the first time I watched it, I was like, I'm not certain that I like this film, because they broke the superhero mold.
Well, sure,
Like,
someone who doesn't like superhero films writing a superhero.
right. And so, like, the PTSD, I'm a huge comics fan, and so, like, well, this wasn't the Mandarin I expected, and then it was a fake, and it threw me for a loop. Now I love it. Like, watching it later on, I'm like, oh, this is great. But the first time watching it, I was like, man. But do we feel like Chaos adds a level of gravitas, or do we think it's too light, or do we think that's necessary?
No, I don't think it's lightness. I mean, like with Chaos in particular, like I think they did a really good job of, because you get kind of distance from, like, if it was a more traditional version of the Greek myths, you know, it's kind of like, you know, all that, like, up on the pedestal, and, you know, you don't have that sort of access. Like I said, it separates you from the narrative. I think part of it is that it draws you in by being like the underworld, being like a bureaucracy, and being, there's a lot of very familiar things in it, in settings and contexts that would be, you know, not familiar to us.
They're making it relatable.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And I say that because RPGs, that myth, they're like, what are we expecting for an RPG? Right now, we're talking about hardness, right?
Right.
And there's lots of people who run comedy games. There's lots of people who run like Toon. Like, I have one friend of mine who, that's his game. That's his trick, is Toon. And I couldn't do that for very long. You know, they did a Piers Anthony series about Zan. They did an RPG for Zan, and that's like an old.
Is it just problematic as Zan is?
Right, and that's a very old school fantasy series, but it's all tongue in cheek, and so the entire game is tongue in cheek. You know, certainly growing up, I think I'm better with it now, but certainly growing up, I was always kind of a stick in the mud when it came to that stuff. Like, I was a vampire GM, you know? So do we feel, or should an audience in any way feel that myth is too grandiose an idea for RPGs?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a perception people will have in saying that, which is why I wanted to deal with it. But I don't think so. I mean, I think that the idea of this is much broader, really. I mean, in terms of even in terms of talking about Greek myth, like, I mean, the gods themselves are portrayed in almost like a soap opera, a lot of them, and kind of like what their concerns are, kind of very petty, sometimes even more petty than Plato in a way.
100% petty, right? Well, and I sort of like think even in the MCU, Thor, he can be petty, right? He can be like, and like, because Thor demonstrates a certain level of privilege, right? He can sort of like swashbuckle his way through things.
And part of what makes the character work in a way is actually making fun of that sense of grandiosity, especially the early appearances of him where he's kind of like, I am Thor, and then kind of like, then the joke comes after that.
Right.
Because everyone else
usually delivered by Kate Denton.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I also think that in terms of myth making and the grandiosity of the name versus the reality, I think you're spot on with, like, if I recently heard an interesting discussion about celebrities and why people are fascinated by celebrities, which may be the same reason why we play RPG games, which is that the reason why people are fascinated by celebrities is because it is almost like the gods. It is almost like the gods of our time, that we get to watch them with all their quirks and
we kind of make our own narratives. And
then boy, are they Greek gods.
Right. But also when you're sitting in a group of people that you've been playing, for a couple of years, you see all those same things. You're seeing, who's dating who, or who's, really petty, or who's, tries to fudge the die on you, or one way or the other. So you see these little human quirks pop up in the gaming, sometimes the characters, but also the players you're playing.
And also you get to see a side of the personality. Because I'm not a big fan of the self-insert kind of character where it's like, especially if it's every character where it's like yourself, but better at things.
Right.
But like, nevertheless, I think it's very hard for most people to like play a character that's truly unlike them. You know, for at least for very long.
I try in a lot of ways. Like, it's very rare that I play a white dude. Like, that's just not a thing. Most of my characters are female. A lot of my characters are people of color.
Right.
And that's not meant to be a culturalization. It's like, quite honestly, I just don't find white dudes interesting.
Right. But you know that.
Right. Exactly. So I very much do try to like go out. I have a type. Do you guys have a? So do you have a?
I have several, but I do have some. Yeah.
I would say that it's interesting. I feel like because I am brown,
right,
I've always chosen to play a brown figure.
Yeah.
And because of the absence historically of brown figures in D&D and these games, it's always been important to represent. So
we don't need more white dudes in fantasy in RPG.
So I think so that's interesting for me. I think what's interesting at a further sub-level is, do you play the historically African-American big guy with the big gun and the big muscles, or, and that's also a little subtrope of what takes place in the world of being a brown and an RPG guy character. But anyway, that's just my thoughts.
I think that stuff's important, and not to dwell on it too much, but like, you do have to be, like, so often we will look for cultural analogs to, I won't lie, to make it more interesting, right? Because there's probably a lot of people, much like we're all, probably a little over D&D. A lot of people are, probably a little over, European historical medieval fantasy.
Yeah. Although that's a huge topic, but it's definitely a fascinating thing that, like, as much as we want to do fantasy in a fantasy context, like, you're always drawing on history or on, the art of other times or whatever, or movies, whatever, to like kind of flesh that out, because you have to have a shared understanding with people you're playing with.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so relatable.
Yeah, exactly. And so you kind of wind up falling back on those things. Right. And it's always a challenge because, like, you have things like the, Oriental quote unquote adventures and stuff like that, where it's like, there's obviously, issues with how it's portrayed, but at the same time, it's like, that's it's like, it's already trying to be a fantasy version of it. It's not trying to portray the historical accurate thing. So kind of like, are we able to distinguish at the table of those things? And I think that does come down to a lot of kind of the trust of the people that you're playing with.
Yeah, I would use the term good faith. if you're using, sounds and voices, and as long as it's not derogatory or, I think it's generally in good faith.
Right. No Jar Jar Binks, right?
Right.
And I think it's important to note something that I will bring up often in terms of game design and gameplay is social contract.
Yep.
And I think it's a big piece of the puzzle. I see a lot of conversations going about, I had a problem with this player, or my GM did this that I didn't feel like, and was kosher. And I recently saw something about Cypher, and GM asked, do you have to use GM intrusions?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about GM intrusions when we talk about Cypher and Invisible Sun later on, but basically there is a story economy in the Cypher system that allows GMs to kind of push,
take over,
right? And we were talking about agency a little bit, and quite honestly, we could have like an entire episode.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
A lot of these topics will be like explored further later on. And it's an interesting question because I think old school GMs especially are so used to running games through cult of personality, are so used to being the director to the players, right? It's my game. These are my players, right? And I've always said, certainly since the 2000s, I'm a player too as a GM. And granted, I generally take a GM role, but I'm a player too, and I don't have any more power at the table than anyone else. And so it's important that social contract agree, like,
or at least you understand what your mutual roles are.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be even more important in horror games because there's a little bit more GM, and caveat, there's you're pushing your players a little bit more. A good outcome may not necessarily be expected.
Yeah,
right.
That can be a challenge because loss of control is part of horror, but at the same time, some players really hate having their character's agency taken away. Right. Yeah.
So.
I think part of that is establishing the terms earlier on. Mm-hmm. If you're playing Dracula and there are, female characters going on, and Dracula plays the traditional role of Dracula of seducing and biting these female characters, then, you need to kind of be clear that everybody at the table understands that frame that it takes place in before you execute. Because I think it would be unpleasant to GM a game, create a game, spend the time to develop the story arc, and maybe I am more of the traditional director GM, and then try to execute and, have to stop or control or change a story because, somebody gets uncomfortable. I'd rather say, okay, it's rated R. Let's all agree we're playing a rated R movie. Right. And there's certain things that can happen in this rated R movie. And if you're not okay with the rated R movie, then, this may not be the right place for you. But they still should be able to say if they get uncomfortable in the middle of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there are actually tools developed for that. Interestingly enough, there's narrative tools. One called the Black Spot, or one called the X. The Lines and Veils is one I'm very often use.
How does that work?
So the X is for in the middle of the game. I don't want to talk about this, right? So, and it's designed to be. We may or may not be friends, right? And we could be at a convention, and I don't feel like having a therapy session in front of all of you when I'm role playing. I think it's very appropriate to be like, let's move on. Yeah. Cut the scene, whatever.
Fade to black.
Fade to black, right? So that's one thing.
Fade to black is in
that, and then lines and veils, I think, are very important. So lines are hard lines. Here are things we do not want to talk about in this game. So we may be running horror, but we're not going to be talking about rape and incest. That's a good, solid example, and sexual assault, a solid example for most games. You could be talking about a game that has Dro in it, right? And be like, we don't want to explore racial ideas or, racism and such. We don't, yada, yada, yada. But consequently, while there are social pieces that lines and veils can talk about, I feel like it's important that there's also genre pieces, right?
There definitely are, yeah. Big part of what genre is, I think, in a game.
Right. To really be like, I don't want any dragons. Like, I want to play this fantasy game, but I'm sick of, quite honestly, for the longest time, it was, I don't want to talk about zombies and I don't want to talk about vampires, because they were just done to death for quite a while. Veils are things like, we could talk about this stuff, but have it be behind closed doors. I don't want to see the gore, which can be problematic if you're like, by the way, straight up, this is going to be a body horror game. Right. Like, don't come to the table if you're not, and you have to, in a convention setting, you have to put that in the description. Here's our little trigger warning.
That's a big part of it too, is kind of the context you're playing and who you're playing with.
Right.
Because I agree with all of this. And I think back, I've played in very few games where it was kind of necessary to do any of those things. The reason why being that it was usually with established people who have been playing with for years. It's like, it's like a partner that you've known for a long time or something. You kind of know what, and as long as you just establish the context, the rest of it seems to come along with that. And I think genre does establish that a lot. Like if we know we're playing Dracula, what comes, but if you're playing at a convention, you don't know like who you're dealing with. You definitely need to have those sort of things explicit, so that's.
Yeah. I'd still like to have those conversations. I mean, we haven't done so yet because we're doing short form.
Right. Like Torchbearer, we didn't really have, but we didn't, it's like you didn't kind of know what you're doing.
That's very interesting how you say that. You're right, because quite honestly, I know you're right, because I know all of those people. Like you don't know all those players, but we probably should have a conversation about Lines of Veils to some small degree,
Again, I think this swims back to where we started, which is, just as an interesting question. Isn't Dracula by definition almost a rape situation?
Right.
I mean, the story itself, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like, I don't know if you guys saw Jessica Jones and the idea of the Purple Man, but basically it was a villain, a Marvel villain whose power is to do whatever he tells you to. And so they clearly had sexual assault there.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I think that you're right. I mean,
which is why you have to have an open disclosure, open discussion before you even hit the table. Yeah.
Like, with Veils, you could be like, look, I understand that's the concept, but maybe let's not role play through it. Right. That the door closes, right? There was an X-Men comic where
that's cool. Yeah, that's a good word.
Like Kitty and Colossus go to have sex and they walk into a room and the door closes. We know they had sex. We're all adults. We have context. And it sort of can be the same thing,
Yeah.
But sometimes a GM or a group are coming to the table, a character might be coming to the table saying, well, shit, that was sort of my whole concept. Now, some concepts are going to be problematic. I absolutely hate, as far as social contract goes, I absolutely hate those players who are like, oh, but I'm just playing my character. You're like, no, you're being an asshole. Regardless if your character's going to be an asshole or not, that's not an excuse.
Right.
For you to.
Sure. Although that's one of those things that, I think it depends a lot on the context, certainly, because there are situations where your character will do something that's perhaps against what other characters in the party might want or do or whatever. And I've seen situations outside of the groups I've run where that's been a real problem. And I think back about the groups I've run, and it's very rarely been a problem. And I think the reason why is because there's a pretty clear demarcation between character and me. So it's like, and a lot of times they'll even say, like, my character would do this. How do you feel about, how do you want to play that? It's almost like giving people the opportunity for their character to stop it or something to happen in the fiction to kind of, bring that about. But at the same time, usually people are kind of like, as long as you've introduced it that way and it's a conversation, then
they also may be a more
forcing it. Yeah, I mean,
more
that
mature
too.
gamer, having spent more time thinking about it. And I mean, I remember there every now and then you run into that gamer who wants to go off in a completely different direction, and you're like,
I also usually run games that have a very kind of writer's room feel to them, and a lot of people I play with are also writers, kind of more than actors. So there is that kind of like, we're all collaborating on creating the story kind of thing. What makes sense?
Which brings us back to the myth making, right?
Yeah.
And and some genres lend themselves to that a little bit more than others.
Yeah, I think so.
As we talk about horror, I think a lot of players start edging more towards immersion, more towards the idea of maybe I want to be scared. I'm trying to be creeped out. I'm playing a horror game. And as a GM, you're trying to thrill. You're trying to get that rise out of your players.
Right. And
that requires a different atmosphere, both meta-wise and
you need to surprise them
physically.
sometimes, which is a big thing too. Because if you pre-advertise everything that's going to happen,
then it's way hard.
Right, exactly. That's it, and that can be a challenge, I think, in that context. Especially with a group where you're not as familiar with kind of what's a good idea and what isn't.
Because I think that's one of the things you absolutely need. You need some people to understand that you wouldn't leave the group if you were in it, but as part of the horror story, it's much more compelling to sometimes get people to isolate themselves, make themselves vulnerable, and
exactly. And those techniques are the things that we're really going to try to explore, right? Those each of these games that we're looking at, we're going to pull a piece from. Hopefully, a lot of these games, we're just going to talk about like what are the themes, right? Or that the theme and the mood that the game brings with it. Sometimes it's just setting. It's a creepy setting. You know what I mean? Aliens is an interesting one where it's like the setting itself is not intrinsically have to be horror. Right.
Sure.
And in fact, all the aliens films actually pick up a different genre. So I would propose that Alien is a horror film, Alien 2 is an action film, and Alien 3 is a thriller.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's like you have the same setting, you have the same antagonists, right? But a lot of what we're going to talk about here is how do you bring those ideas to the table?
Right.
Beyond I roll dice, beyond a good GM explaining things, that there's a lot more to this than.
Well, this is interesting because, our goal is to play these games.
Yes.
And if we break down all the plot mechanisms, will that take away from us sitting at the table? Because your plot mechanisms, what makes a hard game for you, may be different than what makes my game a hard game. Or like you said,
that's for you.
Like I had people say, I'm not going to go see the Aliens Romulus because they went back to the horror. I don't mind the thriller, but I don't want the horror.
Right. We have a series of games, right, that we're going to run, and those were chosen because they have elements that are different, right? Some of them are even traditional RPGs, but they have elements in them, and we're trying to kind of explore in the few hours that we're playing these games what those elements are that make this a hard.
Sure. And a lot of times the elements that kind of are even explicit in the rules. Because that's like become a bigger and bigger thing for me as I've been kind of intensely playing more games. Is looking at that, even from group to group, kind of like there's what's on the page in the book. And there's also a difference between what's on the page in the book and how people run it. But that's a whole other thing, But also just like sort of these implicit elements, and they're kind of harder to tease out. But it's I think really interesting.
Do you want to know what the fallen are, little one? In a sense, they are angels, but not the angels your mom imagines she prays to. brass trumpets picnicking in the clouds. In their true essence, they are great swirling engines of wing and blood, fiery eyes that peer around the corners between worlds. Dark, radiant things conjured from fresh battlefields. A Frankenstein's Valkyrie, forever crashing to Midgard. What grief demands their hate? What vast cannibal hunger?
Welcome to the Fallen Cycle. This is a universe full of secrets, waiting for those brave or foolhardy enough to seek them out. Discover more about the myth-punk Fallen Cycle universe at fallencycle.com.
All right. So I think the key, tone becomes a big part of a horror game. And we'll have a conversation about mood and theme, because I think they tend to be sort of like these weird things that a lot of games talk about, but then don't deliver on, because people just kind of do whatever's comfortable, right? And not necessarily what does the game demand.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that weird thing of like, am I here for me or am I here for the group? Kind of deal. So anyway, so your boss's name is Barsov.
Barsov.
And he is a large, sort of corpulent man. He wears this beat up brown ill-fitting suit. He's a little, if you imagine kind of the Kingpin, like he's just solid, but he is fat. Like he was
probably once pretty fit, but now he's kind of gone a little soft.
Yeah, maybe in his youth when he was a young thug, you get the sense.
This is the boss of both of our.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the crew's boss, right? He went up from the ranks and is now the boss to this small crew. He's basically like brought you all in. What do you owe Barsov? Why do you owe Barsov that you do what he says? Like, not just loyalty or anything, that like you owe him something. What is it that you owe him?
Sure, my family along the way.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. All right. Maybe he's known you growing up on the streets. Oh, okay. All right.
Well, it's like dynamic there.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I guess I'm thinking my character was a stray, basically. And so like probably taken in at a very young age.
Just like Mark.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it actually might be interesting if we were both taken in, by him. And because you're kind of opposites in the way of like, my character's good at hunting people, but like doesn't have that nature in him. It's kind of been imprinted from the outside, where the character is like kind of is a vicious person. It's interesting.
What do you feel like was that turning point for you guys? Like having grown up in the streets together, what do you feel was that point where you were like ends justify the means, and law of the street?
Growing up is obviously, there were a lot of fights, but then one time I let somebody like kind of walk away and then I got hit by a brick. So then I had to beat them to death, and I'm like never gonna give everybody a chance like that again.
Right. You gave somebody an opportunity and they stomped on you for it.
Or their friends stomp on me.
I guess they wouldn't feed me or anything for a while. I refused. And then eventually they made me kill someone, or maybe even like a stray cat or something like that. Like
right.
It's like you can't eat until you do this. And
right.
I kept resisting it, but eventually like I got to eat.
Right. It's all for you. It was a necessity, not a choice. Right. That's fun. That's awesome. All right. So Barsov smokes a cigar. He's balding on top. He tries to maintain a certain amount of hair, but doesn't do a very good job. He's a rather odious man. He's always, and you guys know this, he's always leaned on his sort of chaotic nature and his ability to always do whatever is necessary, right? And that's why his clients go to him, because he seems to have no qualms. He seems to have no moral compass. And which to some degree, not that you're necessarily introspective about this, but to some degree makes it even more poignant when he decides to have a conscience, you know, when he decides to take care of somebody, when, you know, he decides to murder somebody like your, you know, whoever was taking care of you prior to him, you know, then he sort of like turns it up to 11, you know. And, you know, members of his crew don't really get a sense of like why he takes care of them, you know, but he always steps up to the plate, right, for crew members. But he's also very fast to make examples of people who betray him, or sometimes just ones that fail, right? Because he does not work well, he carries around a cudgel. It's a stick with a large end, ostensibly a shillelagh, right? The shillelagh is at this stage dark, stained with the blood of the crew's enemies. People who cross him, he takes a bit of pleasure in making certain that he deals with them himself, obviously backed up by a bunch of murderous thugs. Right? So he is sitting, you said back rooms, right? What is the like, if there was like a shop, what kind of shop? I really always loved that Bill from the Gangs of New York was a butcher. I always loved that he would like be in the middle of doing, you know, his job while he was having like, you know, meetings.
And I picture with the background like a noodle shop or like some sort of like restaurant with like a lot of people going through the front room. And there's like a back area.
Right. Yeah, you know what it is? It's like a mushroom pierogi place. It's like they do have like a soup stock, but it's really a pierogi place, you know.
It's worth mushroom bother me, but the
I know, I'm with you, but you know, it's part of the heart.
No, I like it.
So he makes they make, you know, somebody he knows makes these little pasta pillows filled with mushroom. And they're just, people just die for them, right? They're in, you guys are in Silk Shore. No. Yeah, you guys are in Silk Shore. Yeah. And it was in Crow's Foot, right? That is he's going to send you.
Where we hunt,
Where you hunt. You guys have a meeting. Now, he doesn't do anything in the pierogi shop. He has a stool, which all of you are shocked has survived this long. There are rumors that is in fact the same stool and has always been the same stool. But there he sits, he has a corner and he just sits in the corner, and has meetings and disperses whatever. The most horrific thing any of you have experienced is when he gets out of his fucking stool. When he stands up, everybody's heart stops, right? Because you know some shit is going down. But there he is, he's smoking, he's like, you know, talking to everybody. And then as people are sort of like, you know, sauntering out, he's like, you and you stay.
I like family.
Right. He says, I have a little special something for the two of you to do for me. I've gotten a contract in to some bloke that thinks he's sort of above things around here. And I want you to I want you to remove him from the equation.
Can't we just send a message?
We are not the first crew to be hired for this, as you can imagine.
What happened to the first crew?
The rumor has it remember, you're a crew, right? He's the head of your crew. And he's like, not the two of you, like everybody who just left. Right? And he says, he rattles off, I don't have the names off, but he rattles off a number of crew names of people that you all know. And all better than you. Like all... Like, this is basically like the shit rolling downhill, right? He's like, this is an opportunity for us.
They failed or they didn't come back?
Very likely the latter.
Kind of look like make eye contact with you, but don't say anything.
Well, we can't tolerate that.
So, don't fuck up. And Percy will give you the details. Percy is the little old lady who makes the pierogies and like doles out dossiers. Like she'll be doing stuff, she's like short and squat. She's basically like a little tent. And, she teeters around and she like, here you go, darling. And hands you a folder that has like names and addresses and any pertinent details that.
Where my pierogi?
She does. She'll give you it'll be like, under the plate of pierogies. Right.
So what's your character look like?
He's got curly hair. He wears a vest with not much of a undershirt on, so his muscles kind of show. He's got pants and boots. And then that's it. He's kind of a show off if he's
okay.
Yeah.
Kind of ripped. Does he like spend his off time like
like chains around your neck?
No.
I was just picturing the bare chest on
the muscles are
do you have like a weapon de plume? Do you have like a weapon of choice?
Throwing
knives. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fun. It reminds me of in The Crow. Remember the knife guy? He just wore the leather vest.
So my character's name is Crowl. I didn't get
Crowl.
that.
Okay.
Crowl Squirrel. Sorry, Crowl and Nugs.
Yeah,
like
Crowl and Nugs.
So my character is like really skinny, kind of androgynous, and usually very clean cut for like the underworld. But wears very simple, like all black kind of outfits, and usually kind of quiet spoken.
I always got a load of cash. I mean, it might only be ones wrapped up, the equivalent of one. But I use it
with 120 at the end.
I'm very image focused. Like, he's all surface level. Right? He's all surface. And then but also for the gambling. So I can always get in. So I pull out a lot of cash for me.
Oh yeah, what's your vice?
Obligation is a vice?
Yes.
How's that work? That seems like it might be right for my character, but I have to find out what it is first to make sure.
Yeah. Obligation is you're devoted to family, cause, or organization or a charity. So you're doing service.
Yeah, obligation.
Yeah, that's fun. So how this works is we start with two things. The first thing we start with is called gather information, right? So you have a little bit of information. There is this guy who has moved into Crow's Foot recently. He is considered a recluse, but has over time sort of built up his own crew, right? And his name is Kasarin. You believe that he's probably he is from another place, probably Skovlander. And he recently moved from the mountains, deep in the mountains of some Skovland, village. And he fancies himself a noble. And tells people to refer to him as Baron. So Baron Kasarin.
Okay.
This is the stage which you do one of two things. You can either jump right in, or you learn a little bit about him to get a better sense of how you might want to approach this.
I'd like to learn more about it.
Yeah, same.
All right. So you get to do what's called a gather information roll. Ostensibly for two of you, what's going to happen is one of you will make the gather information roll and the other person can decide to help or not. And then the other person will probably make the engagement roll, which gets you right in.
Gathering information is probably my specialty.
Okay.
I have a 3 in hunt, so I feel like that's...
So how do you want to, how are you going to approach how do you normally approach looking more into this?
Well, part of my character's sort of understated appearance is to be able to sort of shadow people without really drawing much attention to themselves. So I would probably start spending time in that part of the city. So yeah, I'm going to start shadowing them. Which is like, I'm hunting them, but hopefully they don't know I'm hunting them.
So you're gonna go to their
go there.
To the
Best neighborhood and basically start like hanging out there for a couple days, trying to keep an eye on him. I want to try to avoid making contact because I don't want him to even notice my face really.
So you're a crow?
I'm a hound.
Hound. No, I'm sorry, your name.
Crow.
Oh, Crow, yeah.
So Crow, do you want me there or do you want me, like, am I off gambling? Like, it's
up to you.
I mean, in theory, it'd be good for you to be around in case if I need muscle. On the other hand, though, but you might want to go come with.
I'm not huge. Like, I'm not like massively muscle. It's just ripped and all that other stuff. So so my question, and I'm not subtle.
Yeah,
so my question is, do you want me there or
not with me? I want you with me, but ideally you're in the neighborhood.
Okay. All right.
Now, how you can help in this, right, is to think of this narratively. Helping doesn't necessarily mean being next to him, right? You could have a scene where you're basically like roughing up one of his
I'll do that.
gang members.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or you're, whatever the case is.
Right.
And you're actually...
I'll tell you what, here, you let me know, you find out about the operation, you let me know, and I'll engage that person in a conversation.
Right.
That maybe we could get some information. Or I'll go buy something for him and we can strike up, hey, I'm looking for so and so and so.
Yeah. And I'm looking for patterns. Like, does he go to a particular place at a particular time every day? That sort of thing.
So for your gather information, you decide what skill you're going to use. What skill do you use? Hunt.
Yeah.
Okay. And you roll that many dice, right? Now, Mark gets to roll a die helping you. Now, Mark, if you want to help, what you're going to do is you're going to mark 2 stress.
Okay. Where can I write the stress?
There should be little tick marks.
Okay.
See it?
Yeah.
And you're going to roll a die. And then do you want to push yourself?
Not yet.
Not yet. And do you want to hear Devil's Bargain?
I'll hear it.
Okay. And the Devil's Bargain is going to be that he sees your face.
Then no.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Right now.
So both of you roll just the 1 die, helping die.
Okay.
And you roll yours. And if we get any 6s...
2 6s.
2 6s. So that is a critical success. It goes exactly as you plan. You maybe want to find out what some of his comings and goings are. You find somebody associated with him, beat it out of him. And then you go to this place at the time needed. And what you see is this man in a heavy cloak. He's wearing a top hat. And there is a coach, right? A 2-horse coach in front of his small estate. It's relatively decent sized for Crow's Nest, Crow's Foot. He's certainly made some deals to have this sort of plot. Mm-hmm. You also happen to catch him at a time when other people aren't around. And you notice a couple things. The first thing you notice is he clearly has the local lamplighters in his pocket because there is nothing lit in at least a 1-block radius around his house. And you'll notice that like areas get blacked out along his path, right? So it's very dark. The other thing you notice is, as far as you can tell, he does not have a driver. He gets into the coach, and the coach goes.
Ghost. Yeah.
You are able to keep up with him. He makes a number of stops before he visits a brothel in Silkshore. So he goes over the bridge and so on and so forth. And he seems to frequent one of the girls.
That's
brothel in Silkshore.
That's to or from.
She's a redhead. She is stunning. She has porcelain skin. She has bright red lips. She seems to be maybe from the Dagger Isles. And he seems absolutely enthralled with her. The other thing you notice is, and only because you get the critical.
Right.
So there is a point where your heart sinks into your chest for two reasons. First off, because he does not look well. His skin is on the pale side of blue. It looks like he has sort of some veins that are a little obvious around the sides of his head. What really sinks you is that he turns and seems to look right at you, right? But then just his look just chills you to the bone. Then you realize like it's not focused. He's just like looking in general direction. But you have never like pressed yourself into a fucking corner like as hard as you did, right? To not be seen. And you swear he is the spitting image of the father that Barsov murdered.
Well, I'm definitely going back to Barsov. After gathering this information, I mean, I'll report to you and just kind of tell you what I saw, and also be like, I mean, if he was any normal mark, I would say we should camp out and wait for him to go to the brothel again. But we should talk to Barsov because this doesn't seem right.
All right, to me. So this is the interesting part of this game. Now we go right into it.
Right.
All right. So now you're going to decide based on the information you have. You're also allowed to add details, right? Sometimes I may have you spend stress to do so, but you can add details. If I feel like what you're going to say requires a flashback, right? Then you'll spend one stress to have a flashback scene. But by and large, you determine how are you going to murder him? Like basically, are you going to his house? Are you gonna hit his girlfriend? What are you gonna do?
My suggestion would be that without taking too much time, get a tag on his girlfriend and either meet her so we can find out what force, you've explained this weird energy to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Then it looks like someone who should be dead also.
Right. But I want to know more about that before we just try to slice it dice.
Same.
Like if it was somebody else that you just throw up in a dark alley to that. But with this, we might want to speak to the girlfriend who knows him intimately. So she'll know exactly what his energy.
Now hold on one sec. Where are you going to murder him? That's what we start with. Everything else you go backwards from.
Okay.
Right?
So on the way to or the way from the brothel?
No, I'm trying to murder him in the brothel.
In the brothel, you think? Because then people are going to see you. My thing is, don't even.
That's what the two of you have to decide.
Okay.
It's up to you. But you have to adjudicate that.
He's about to get it on. He's not going to have to be worried about his sword or his guns or whoever else. It's not going to have a lot of security around.
That's true.
So we can.
There's also bystanders.
There are bystanders, but if we murder him and bar the door, if you get the door, I think I can murder him. I mean, obviously,
if you could do it without hurting other people, then all right.
Well, but I mean, that's why I want to talk to the I mean, get, meet up with the prostitute first, and that way we can pump her for some information. I mean, if you want to do it on the way there, we can. But now, we're still in front of a brothel. We're still on the road there. We're still in the street there, and it is dark, so maybe people won't see us. But I mean, but like I said, I think let's get it on.
So here are your choices: assault, do violence on the target; deception, right? Lure, trick, or manipulate the target; stealth, occult. Stealth was obvious, right? Trespass unseen. Occult, engage in supernatural powers. Social, negotiate, bargain, or persuade, or transport. This is you're planning the engagement. So for instance, if social is the way you're going in, then that could mean talking to either Borisov or the prostitute, right? That could be how you're getting in. That's your point of entry.
Right, the first point. Right.
That's your first point of entry.
But we don't really have any social skills.
Or you can go right for one of the other ones, and then that becomes a flashback scene, right, of talking to those two.
So we have two choices. We really have stealth, which is I'm, climbed up onto the, or snuck into the brothel at some point, and then when I know he's engaged, popping out of a closet or popping through the door and throwing knives into his back.
Right.
That's our stealth option.
Yep.
Or the assault is as he's walking in, more on your line, as he's walking in, assaulting him.
Would stealth also be hunt? If I'm going to be like sharpshooting him, basically?
Yeah.
Then yeah, let's do that. Because that's my thing is,
Okay.
shoot and hopefully not be seen.
So what I'll do is I'll make sure, since he's going to shoot, I'll make sure, I assume you're going to, our plan is that he's going to get out of the carriage, you're going to take a shot, and then I'll just be a bystander, and if necessary, I'll finish him off.
So where do you want to do this?
On the way to the bar. On the way to the brothel.
You want to figure out whether the whole undead thing, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, it's probably would be a flashback if we're doing it this way, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I'm really good at taking long shots. I have to push myself, but I can shoot beyond the distance normal for the weapon. So I'm going to probably then set up myself kind of like on the roof.
Okay.
But using a pistol, which means, usually you don't shoot from the roof with a pistol, but I'm going to use it like a rifle.
Right, you're gonna do.
Yeah.
What's the environment look like? Is there lots of street people moving around in front of them?
Yeah. So imagine Venice, right? Only like 3 layers of Venice.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's buildings built on buildings. It's very chaotic.
Okay.
Silk Shore is very well lit. There's lots of strings of lights. There's fountains. You have like these big squares where you'll have various different, you'll have maybe a bar in the middle of this well-lit square, and then a brothel over here, and then a gambling den over here, So then they all feed on each other. That's what Silk Shore. The bridge that you'll have gone across, think very Venetian, well sculptured, going from Crow's Foot over to Silk Shore, well sculptured banisters, right? Rather long. If you look at that bridge, that bridge is really pretty long. And it'll have, every 25 yards or so, right? There'll be a lamp, kind of like.
Okay. So what I'll do is, assuming there's a front here, I'll just be standing, about 10 to 15 feet of where we think he's going to pull up. So you get your clear shot at him.
If you can help basically by kind of maybe distracting him by calling out to him or something. That would be good.
Sounds good. Awesome. All right. So this is basically stealth, right?
Yeah.
All right. So the point of infiltration ostensibly is when he pulls up and gets out of the carriage. You're going to approach him, right? Yeah. Which makes sense. Now you're going to be the distraction, right? You're going to be the who makes the engagement roll, right? Now, what the engagement roll does is sort of sets the stage for what kind of situation you're all in, right? Going into this. Is it there are 3 levels of risk, right? There's controlled, there's risky, and there's desperate. One of the problems with this game in terms of XP is you get XP for basically turning up the risk. But in a one-shot, right? A problem with one-shots with this game is you're not really worried about XP.
That's true. A lot of one-shots really working it down to it too.
Yeah.
Well, but like D&D, who cares, right? The idea of XP is killing stuff, right? So it's weird in this because you're basically demotivated to not turn things up, right? Which is kind of one of the drivers to the game. So just keep that in mind, that one of the drivers to the game is like turning up the risk in order to get XP, right? But in any case, I am going to set this at risky to start. You're going to make an engagement roll, and you're going to roll 1 die.
Okay, but part of my thing is going to be, what is the name of the prostitute that I was seeing? I don't need it. What's that for?
Sure.
Let's say
Agatha.
Agatha.
Name is Agatha.
I'm going to say, so Agatha has a message for you, something like that, something that gets him to stop in his tracks, face me, and you have your beat. Now, meanwhile, behind my message or behind my back, I'll also have my knife in case it becomes necessary.
Sounds good. So you start with 1 die.
Jeez.
Right? Which is called the fortune die, right?
Okay.
It's basically 1 die for sheer luck, right?
Okay.
Now, is this operation particularly bold or daring?
I think so.
I think so. I think you're out in the open.
Yeah.
I think
I'm not, but he is. Yeah.
I mean, you've heard of this guy's reputation, right?
I mean, just so you know, when you're taking the shot, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to finish it if it's
right. That was the idea.
That's the other thing,
Yeah. So it's particularly bold. Take 1 die. Is this operation overly complex or contingent on many factors? Nope. Does the plan detail expose vulnerability of the target? Yep. Hit them where they're weakest. Take 1 die, another die. Is the largest strongest against the approach, or do they particularly defensive special preparations? No. Can any of your friends or contacts provide aid? So look at your friends. Do you feel like any of your friends can add to this?
You mean any of our crew?
From our crew?
No, you have friends. You marked a friend and an enemy.
Well, I have Steiner, an assassin, as a friend.
Another assassin.
So he could be a backup.
Is he in the crew, or is he in another crew? Why?
I mean, it was. I'm out. Maybe he's the only friend I really have in our crew, kind of.
Okay.
I can work with him, but kind of like,
right. I can't see he's my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
What about your friend?
Merlani is a pugilist. I don't think I'd want to use him.
Probably not. All right. So here's an important question. Are you nervous enough about this endeavor to, behind Borisov's back, ask him to join the two of you?
I feel like after finding out that this guy is like potentially the dead person that Borisov killed, then yes, I would be.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Add a die. Add another die.
Okay.
Right? And I think that's probably it.
Yeah.
This is a fortune roll.
All right.
No sixes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So 1 to 3 means a desperate position. 4 to 5 is a risky position, and 6 is a controlled position. So right now you are at a risky position starting out. Okay. So just going into this. So what happens? So first off, he steps off the carriage. The first thing you notice is that this well-lit courtyard definitely loses some luster, Some of the string lights might beat out. You see some arcs of ectoplasmic energy sort of like going amongst poles. He definitely has some sort of draining effect on the area. You also notice that people stop talking. This is a very busy little area here, of which most of it is to the other side of his carriage, right? So right now it's like you on the street, and then he pulls up to the square, right? So, and gets out on this side, gets out on the dark side where you're kind of approaching him. And like, you don't really hear anybody talking in the square beyond, you know, but you needed to be on this side for him to be across the way to shoot him. All right. So now you have two choices. You can use sway now, right? To start your distraction, right? Or right from the start, you can use this, him looking, you could do the flashback to Barsov, using her name, you could do a flashback to talking to her, or you could get right into it. What do you want to do?
I want to do the flashback to Barsov.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. So you spend one stress. Right. What do you want to know from Barsov? What are you looking to find out?
Well, first, I've probably gone a little covertly by like kind of like inquiring to him kind of about the person that he killed.
So is this a social thing that you're doing? Yeah. Okay. It sounds like, what kind of information are you trying to get out of him?
I mean, to find out if I can figure out any sort of reason why this person looks so much like
he's still alive. Right? Yeah. Sure.
Of course, I have no social skills, so that's fine.
Well, so how do you Barsov is in the back. He has sidled up to a small round table. It's got this checkered, black and white checkered tablecloth on it. He's got, a glass of wine and a bowl of pierogies, and he's digging into them.
So I'll probably try to start it like in a very like social, amicable sort of way, where like just chatting a little bit, and then kind of like as an aside, almost be like, yeah. So about the they hit your. I was wondering what happened originally with this. It seemed like almost like a non sequitur.
Right. So I want to point out that this scene specifically, because it's coming off of your engagement roll, is starting out as risky. Right? Just keep that in mind, right? Everything having to do with Barsov starts out as risky, right? It's awkward standing in this little corner socially. Right. He's eating, he's just like kind of paying attention to you, but kind of giving off the vibe of like, why is this kid talking to me? Kind of idea.
Right.
And he looks at you, he's wielding this fork, and he says, yeah, I remember your father. He was an ugly sort, wasn't he?
Well, I feel like I just saw him. And it's an interesting thing because it's the person we were sent to kill.
Looks like your father.
I mean, doesn't look like him. He looks like identically like him. Yes.
I mean, my boys put him in the ground. I saw it myself. I take care of you lot.
Is it possible he came out of the ground? Strange things happen in these parts,
So as you guys know, right, they don't generally bury people, right? They generally like incinerate
them.
But in this case, he claims to have bricked him up into the foundation of an abandoned building.
Well, it's even stranger that he's walking around then, isn't it?
He says, I mean, stranger things would have happened. I don't lie, but it seems unlikely.
I followed him for a little while. I got close enough to get a very clear look at his face. And not only the likeness, but also a look of pallor that one might expect from someone who's alive but not.
Go ahead and make a persuade roll.
All right. If I don't have...
Also, ask him for some money so we can get some information. No, while you're sitting in, because that's how I'll try to persuade the girl. And like, don't try to brutalize her.
I don't have any resolve stuff like tune, command, consort, sway.
You have nothing in there, huh? All right. So what you'll do is, this is how this works. You roll 2 dice and take the worst of the 2.
Right.
Now, in doing so, you can push yourself. So you can spend 2 stress to make that one die, right?
Right.
Or you can't do both, or you could take a devil's bargain.
What is the devil's bargain?
Yeah. All right. The devil's bargain is that Barsov takes umbrage to you questioning his abilities. Yeah, he like throws you out, kind of pissed off at you.
I guess I'll do that.
You'll do that? Okay, sounds
Because
good.
I'm kind of pissed at him because he sent us on this mission.
Right. So that's a die. Now you can help, right?
Mhm.
Narratively speaking.
I already took the stress, though. That's my only concern.
That's true. So you're good?
Well, I mean, if you want to tell me how you think I can help in this situation.
Well, it's a flashback, so you could be there, right? Or it could
I
be.
could be there.
You could be there. You could
I would. I mean, though, I think the only thing I could add to so that he wouldn't take umbrage is that we're picking up really weird feelings from this energy from this guy, and this is more complicated than you think it.
Sort of backing up what I'm saying,
Yeah.
basically.
This is way more complicated and bigger than
right.
So the
Do you want to spend the stress?
is it 2?
One stress.
Okay, I'll do 1.
One stress to help, 2 to push.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So that means if you take the devil's bargain and he's going to help
Right.
sway, then it would be 2 dice.
All right, I'll do that.
All right.
2.
2 is your highest? Okay.
2, both 2.
Both 2. All right. So here is where resistance rolls come. You're going to take 1 harm.
Unless if I resist.
What's that?
Unless if I try to resist.
Unless you try to resist, because he's going to beat you.
I'll try to resist.
Okay. And that's going to be both of you.
I got to roll 2.
Yeah, if you want to avoid, you could take the harm and take the licks, or you can make a resistance roll. Now, it's 6 minus your highest die.
Okay, so mine's just 1?
It's just 1. Yep.
Oh, okay. I thought it would be 3. Okay.
So you get no stress and you avoid the consequence.
Mm-hmm. So the 1.
You roll the 1s, you get 5 stress, but you avoid the consequence.
Jesus.
So he's like literally about to like lay into you, and I think you drag him out. You're like, all right, boss,
Right.
and pull him out of there. But you're really like, you see, he's just insulted,
Right.
And you don't insult Barsov, right? And he like reaches for the cudgel, and like the color runs out from your pasty face, and your friend like pulls you out.
Now I have to go through with the job.
All right.
So now we have the scene with the prostitute.
Yes.
So now I have a choice. I can either use command and sway, or the threat of violence against her to get the information.
Right.
So I think in a normal game, I would choose to use command and sway
Okay.
before I would resort to violence with her. Even maybe a little bit of charm.
Right.
But she doesn't know me, and she is revealing confidences of a client.
Right.
So if we approach her, she could then tip him off.
That was my concern.
Yeah.
So now maybe we should just murder her.
That is probably the consequences to failure in this situation. Is.
I mean, my character Crow would definitely be opposed to killing her. Not to the point where he'd like, get into a fight with you, but like,
Do you know? So I don't discuss any of the. I mean, since I know that about him, I won't discuss it with him. I'll just say, do you know her pattern? Do you know her?
Do you want to? I mean, you could assume that you're just gonna go to the, you have some coin. You're gonna go to the.
So I go and I hire her as a prostitute. Take some rope with me.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So your flashback. It's a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
So you spend. I think it's 1.
yeah, for flashbacks, yeah.
Is 1 right for a flashback? So you spend 1 stress.
Okay. Oh, geez. All right.
Yep. You start eating through stress. So she, that basically you're let into her room, right? She is sitting at a vanity. Mm-hmm. This room is very well appointed, right? The brothel itself is actually it's nice, but it's not anything like really fancy, This is fancy. Like she has like this silver vanity, and she has all like matching brushes and combs, and a decanter of like, liquor and some glasses, and a big poster bed, with a diaphanous sort of thing around it. Like she is clearly doing well for herself.
Okay.
She looks at you through the mirror, and she says, well, hello, and she turns around, crosses her legs, and she's like, I don't get many of you, in these parts. What's your pleasure?
You.
Sure.
No, that's my.
She blushes,
Blushes. Yeah, no, I put the whole charm on.
Sure,
the whole 9 yards.
Sure.
Go through the whole transaction, make sure.
The whole transaction. Okay.
Make sure she's fully satisfied. That's part of my sway.
That's good.
Part of my sway.
Awesome.
Awesome. This, that, and the other thing. And, and then I'll ask the question.
Yes.
And see how she reacts. Now,
in bed or getting dressed.
Getting dressed. Hands on my weapons, pants on, boots on. Sure, we can still live off. I like my chest out.
Brushing her hair. So you'll start with sway.
Okay.
Right? So that's 2 dice for you, right?
Okay.
Or 1 die or 2 dice?
2 dice.
Sway is 2 or 1?
My sway is 1, but my resolve, I have 2 dots.
No, that's okay. So you start with 1 die, right? For sway. Now, you can either push, which is 2 stress, or you can take a devil's bargain. And do you want to help?
I don't think I can, because I'm guessing you didn't tell me.
Remember he said, asking, what are her patterns, that.
Okay, well, I can help with, in the sense that I had clued you in on
something.
Because I have been spying on them for a little while.
What is her thing? Does she have flowers? Does she what does she like to collect? If she likes to collect flowers, I will have brought her a flower.
Okay, let's see if you succeeded.
And the idea is that I have communicated to her that we know your patterns.
Right. There's a little flattery and threat all in one.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, at this, if it needs to go,
a particular flower that she's
it's either a flower or a florist,
lilacs or whatever,
or if the floral shop that she likes to go to,
right.
Oh,
So do you want to push yourself? Or do you want a devil's bargain?
What's the bargain?
The devil's bargain is that he finds out about this meeting. That's the devil's bargain.
That's not a great one.
No, not a good one. No, that would change the whole structure.
Okay.
I'll say no to the
devil's
bargain.
bargain. So you get 2 dice, right?
So
now, remember that would be succeed or failure. It doesn't mean if you fail, that won't happen.
Let's go for the persuasion, and I will push the persuasion so I can.
So it's 2 stress. So you get 2 dice, and you get 1 die.
Right. Do I get them or I roll it?
I'm going to say this is actually a controlled environment, right? The stakes are actually pretty low here. You're talking to a prostitute. The worst thing that could happen here is that she tells him. If he gets
or somebody tells her that's somebody.
Right. Right now we're at controlled. Right now, what that means is that your consequences are limited. Right now, if you want, you could get an extra die by putting it up to risky.
So I have how many die at this point?
Right now you have 2, and he's rolling 1. So right now you have 3 dice total.
I'm going
to say no right now because I can always try to kill her after this.
So it's controlled. Sure, sounds good.
5. Yeah, baby.
Oh, you said a 6. All right. Is it? Oh, it's 5 and 6.
Yeah.
It's a 5 and 6. Okay, it's 5 and 6, not just 6. All right. So she breaks down crying. And she's like,
put my neck back where it belongs.
She's like, please help me. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn to. She seems really scared. She runs up to the door and opens the door and and closes the door and locks it. And she comes over to you and she puts her hands on her chest. She's bawling on your chest.
My big chest.
And she's whispering to you.
Okay.
Everything you want to know.
Okay. All right. Wow.
So she says, what do you want to know? What kind?
I want to know what this evil energy, this crazy energy around him is. What is he? Is he undead? Is he a lycanthrope? Is he a vampire?
she definitely conveys to you that in his presence, she seems to have no control over herself. And that he doesn't come very often, but because she usually requires several days recuperating. Because she is so emotionally and like just drained.
It's a wraith.
She doesn't feel right. And he actually pays for those days for her to recuperate because the madam complained, right? That she's useless after it.
But I'm not that good.
And right, none of this is in good ways, right? And she definitely feels that it was like some kind of mercy that he didn't just murder the madam, that he actually paid, you know. She says, but I do feel like I have some sway over him, like me pleading that he not kill her seemed to make a difference. You know?
What do we know about vampires?
Well, probably not a lot. Again, you could conceivably have a flashback where you do a little bit of research. The only thing that
while you do the research.
The only thing you've really heard is that vampirism is very likely what happens when, like, one of the possible outcomes to a mad ghost possessing somebody is all you've heard. So ghosts, obviously, when their spirits released from the body, they can go try to possess somebody. It's actually it's a little difficult, not too difficult. Vampires, from what you understand, are like what happens when they stay in that possessed body. You know, now it's this body that is fighting, two souls fighting over one body, you know, kind of idea. So not your traditional vampires, although
to wear wooden stakes and stuff like that.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Well, I can't do anything that causes stress except
I can't shot anything that will cause stress, especially if you're already stressed.
Yeah.
All right. So
are we going to go to the confrontation?
Go to the confrontation.
All right. So
I think though that we may want to consider desperate, because that will give us. You said I'll get an extra die for desperate.
You'll get an extra die if you go up from control to desperate.
We know we're not dealing with anything freaking normal. Like I've spent the last 3 or 4 days training with my knives. I've made sure they're super sharp. I don't know what else I can do. You know, I've gone to church.
And I feel like even though I don't want to go through with this job, especially now, because we made Barsov so angry, I feel like I have to.
Yeah, you have to, right?
like you don't do this, he's coming after you.
And I know that. And though I think you're a bit of a wimp, I'm good. You're still my partner, and I'm loyal to my partner. So that's all right. So we're gonna do this, but I do know that we're in over our heads.
Yeah. All right. So your distraction. Do you feel like this is sway? Persuade? Sway is persuade. Consort is kind of like is hobnobbing.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm not trying to hobnob.
No.
All I'm doing was
you're swaying.
I'm using the prison method of shanking somebody, right?
Yeah.
Which is that, you're a knife back here. You say, sir, I have a message from Agatha from you.
Right.
And then he reaches for the message, you grab the hand, and you start shanking him.
You're
going to take the shot.
You could conceivably, well, it's the same number for you, but color-wise, you could use prowl. Like, prowl is sort of deceptive.
Okay.
To
come in and sneak around.
You sort of see it as prowl, but it's color. Do you want it to be honey-tongued? Do you want it to be like you're wide-eyed and like, sir? Or
what is the difference between scowl and skirmish? Because, if I'm going to use a prison shank on him,
right,
that's more of a skirmish, right?
Yes, but you're not the attack. Right?
Not right away anyway.
Yeah. Right? That's a very different thing, right? Okay. Because with skirmish, you're shink,
right.
right? And going in, right?
I could, instead of even mentioning Agatha at all as a distraction, I could stand just far enough away from draw the knives, to which case he would square off at me and you take the shot.
That's true. That's true.
And then we would keep Agatha out of it.
Right.
Yeah, let's do that. The knives would be out anyways if you need them.
Yeah. And then we keep it, because otherwise he's going to kill Agatha. He's going to kill I don't know, this. I'm sure you came up with this argument, not me.
Right.
He's going to kill him out of the whole 9 yards. But otherwise it's just an ambush.
Sounds good. All right. So
What is the name? Lestat? So let me do a little background to my decision here. So I'm pretty confident in my ability to beat people to death, mostly with my bare hands or my knives. But I'm not quite the pugilist that my ally is. He's like a quite successful boxer and all that other stuff. But I am really confident in my ability. But I'm a little freaked out after seeing this lady and meeting the prostitute, Agatha.
Right.
So what I've done is, since my mom is dead, I've gone to my auntie who, she's like a spiritualist. And I've asked her what what I should do if I'm were to face something. And I kind of told her that something's coming after me, not that I'm going after it. Mm-hmm. And she said, she's offered me a spirit vein charm. I have no idea what that is. And I don't know what it does. That's your special item. That's my special item.
Oh, fun. All right. So you're faced with them. You say, hey, right? You draw your weapons as he steps out of the carriage. Who is going to initiate this? Are you going to?
I'm taking the shot. He's doing the distraction. I don't know which.
Right. So it sounds like you're probably helping him.
Right.
Yes, I'm helping.
Right?
Yeah.
Sounds good. So you get to roll one die. Not yet. You are rolling your die for hunt. If you have 2.
I have 3.
Oh, you have 3 dice in hunt.
That's my focus. Yeah.
All right. So now, do you want a devil's bargain, or do you want to push yourself?
I can push myself now, but I want to hear what the devil's bargain is
The
first.
devil's bargain is your rifle jams.
I'll take the stress, I guess. What the hell?
All right. Sounds good.
Get the one shot. I can get away with
All
it.
right. So it's 2 stress. You push yourself. Sounds a lot of dice. 4 dice and 1 die, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see how it goes.
Oh my God. Got a 6.
You got a 6.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. He looks at you and he opens up his mouth, and inside his mouth is just this swirling void. And he like reaches out to you, and the camera does that like rack focus thing where he seems like awfully close to you despite the fact that he's across the street. And then you hear a crack. And his shoulder kind of like goes back. And he hisses. What do you guys want to do next?
Am I able to fire again?
You have to, it's a breech loader, right? It's going to take you some time.
Takes a round to reload, basically.
But is that what you do? Do you want to like hunker down, put your back to whatever chimney you were near and reload?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I got pistols otherwise.
Sounds
I'm going to launch my knife at him.
You're going to throw
Yeah.
knife at him. Sounds good.
The whole thing is you can try to get off as many as you can in
Yeah,
a minute, but I will.
yeah. Awesome. So that's skirmish,
Yep.
right? Do you want to push yourself, or do you
yeah.
want to take the devil's bargain?
I'm going to push myself.
Sounds
We're going to be all
good.
kinds of traumatized by the end of this.
Yep, that's my last of my stress, but I'm going to push myself on it.
All right, it's 2 stress.
And then...
Did you go over?
Nope.
Okay.
Now, next time I will be in trauma.
Next time you'll be in trauma. Sounds good.
That's it.
Now I'm going to say if you're actively reloading,
I am.
2 5s.
2 5s. Is that a success?
It is. That's definitely a success. It's not a critical one, but
Well, I think it's a partial. Yeah, 1 to 3 it is. It's a partial success. 1 to 3 is failure. 4 and 5 is partial. What would a good partial? All right, so it does bury itself in him, right?
I think it distracts him long enough for him to reload the gun.
Let me think about this for a second. Well, yeah, here you go. You have a choice. right? Your choice is you could do harm, which would be its third level of harm, or it could be a distraction long enough to have him do his thing.
I hopefully succeed.
Harm.
Right. So it goes into him. Let me think of what the partial success would be. What is my pushback?
He gets react.
My pushback is, now remember, you can resist whatever the consequence is, right? I could just do harm back at you, right? The consequence is you start feeling like you're drowning. You find yourself, the only thing you can imagine is that you've gotten thrown into the river behind you, and now you're like gasping for air. Do you want to resist that?
I'd like to try to resist that.
So that is a resilience test, which is your mental, which I think you have 2 in because you have command and sway.
Okay.
So you roll 2 dice to resist that. It's 6 minus your highest die. A 4. So you take 2 stress, which I think sends you into trauma.
Yeah.
Right? You do resist. And you come out of it, you're really just standing there.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Like Agatha.
Right. And like you like snap out of it. But you're just like, what just happened? But now you take trauma. Let's read what trauma does.
I think he's smart.
Yeah.
When a PC marks their last stress box, they suffer a level of trauma. When you take trauma, circle one of your trauma conditions: cold, reckless, unstable, etc.
I'll just choose haunted now. Does that make sense?
All right, cool beans. Now, when you suffer trauma, you're taken out of the action. You're kind of left for dead or otherwise dropped out of the conflict temporarily, only to come back later, shaken and drained. When you return, you have 0 stress. So you come back with no stress, right? So you erase all that stress.
It's not a factor here, but in a longer game, if you get all the trauma, your character has to retire. They can't come back eventually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Haunted. You're often lost in reverie, reliving past horrors and seeing things, which totally makes sense, right? Some undead dude was rattling around in your brain, right? By the way, trauma conditions for campaigns are permanent, right? So you're off in this sort of reverie, right? You're like, go collapse to your knees. Like what? How do you envision this, right? You escape this drowning sensation, right? But what are you doing?
I think I'm just not quite rolled up on the thing, but I'm definitely down and dragging against the wall, trying to get away.
Sure. You like drop knives.
Profusely trying to get my breath, wet knives. And
right. Everything disappears.
And I'm just trying to get away.
Sounds good.
Better make this shot.
Sounds good. So it does give you time, right? We see as you're going through this, he's just like desperately loading, right? And you turn the corner and he is looking dead at you.
I'll look right back at him and pull the trigger.
Okay.
At this point, I'm like, it's going to be him or me. What would the devil's bargain be in this situation?
What is the devil's bargain going to be is you spend too much time looking into his soul.
Oh, good.
Oh, that's a good one. You ever be drowning looking too?
Yeah, what the hell? Might as well take that roll.
I either take the shot or burn some beats me to death.
Pretty much.
All right, so you have 3 dice, right?
Just 4 total.
And are you going to take the?
I'm saying what the hell? I'll take it because I'm going to die either way. Otherwise, it's like.
All right, sounds good. What do you got?
4 is the highest.
Partial success.
Yeah.
All right. You do that last piece of harm. Now you have a choice. Do harm or escape.
Do harm.
Okay, so you do that
Take it down.
last piece of harm. His body explodes into 1,000 bats.
Ooh.
He just completely discorporates, and this becomes this mass that just dissipates into the night.
Well, I'm definitely telling Barsov about that.
You might want to exit before it shows up behind.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to try to get out.
I love partial successes. It's a partial, and you hear, I see you. Who are you? You're shouting into the night.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So that is the score. So now we move into downtime. By the way, I want to point out, and I'll bring one of them out, which I'd like to play sometime down the line, but this is the first mark of a bunch of games called Forged in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
And what Forged in the Dark is basically a whole slew of games that are hacks of this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one I have called Band of Blades, which is basically fashioned off of the Black Company. Did you read the Black Company?
No.
Oh, we'll talk about that later. But there's a cyberpunk version of this. There's like a bunch of different versions of this game. All right. So let's do downtime real quick. This is one of the things I love about this game is that I feel like, and please tell me if you agree or not, I found downtime could be as fun as the score.
That's where a lot of the role playing happens.
Yeah, it was a lot of really fun role playing. So 145, we're just going to walk through this real quick. So some of this, which we'll walk through, but some of this is crew development, right? So the first is payoff. Crew receive their rewards from a successful completed score. And that reward is always in coin, right? Coin is a very abstracted idea of wealth, right? And for this, Barsov, although he's pissed off at you, you're likely the one who should come back and get the payoff. You're all going to, let's see, a minor job.
Since he disincorporates?
Well, we should tell him that happened, obviously.
A minor job is 2, a small job is 4, a standard score is 6, and a big score is 8. Honestly, I'm going to put this at 8 because so many other groups failed at this, right? I'm going to say your crew gets 8. There is always a group that your crew has to pay off in your hunting zone. So normally that would be really important. It's not super important now. What you do is you decide, do you pay them off or do you not, and decrease their faction rating? There's a whole faction system in this. So you could see that while a one-shot could be fun, this whole thing is really designed for a campaign, you know? Heat. So you guys, let's see, was this a smooth and quiet, low exposure thing?
No.
Contained, standard exposure, loud and chaotic, or wild? I think it was
wild, actually.
Well,
I don't think it was wild.
It wasn't like we did it in the middle of like a crowded amphitheater or something.
Well, you did it right in front
of a brothel, right in front of a business.
Right in front of the square.
Shots from across the river. So.
But a lot of the action happened on the other side of his carriage. But you're right. You shot twice into the I would say, probably loud and chaotic sounds about right.
Loud and chaotic.
All right. So that means your crew gets 4 heat on you. Okay. Heat is important because what happens is, just like stress and trauma, once you get to wanted in heat, then things like start going bad.
Cops start looking for you, basically.
But just keep in mind that you have 4 heat. So now we do entanglements. So who was the last person to roll? It was you. Right?
So, yeah.
So you get to roll entanglements. Now it's going to be 1 die, and it's based on your heat. Because you have 4 dice, you got 3. So gang trouble or questioning. I think the blue coats cordon off the area, right? They have to like, what the hell's going on with this carriage? Who's in the area? And they nab your buddy. What was his name?
Steiner.
Go ahead and roll a fortune die.
Okay. 5.
increase your heat by 1 from his questioning. And then you're going to have to, at some point in time, deal with that and decide how Barsov's going to manage this guy who walks out of the Bluecoats station. And now your crew has 5 heat. Right. So now you have, so that's all of the sort of bookkeeping, right? Now you have downtime actions. You guys get 2 downtime actions. Okay. And here are your possibilities: acquire assets and long-term projects. This is stuff like you want to buy a place, you want to craft an item, you want to get in good with a particular gang, right?
Or investigate something.
Those are either short-term or long-term effects, right? That's those 2 things. Assets, acquiring assets are short-term, but they only take 1 downtime action to do. Long-term, we create a hit clock, and then however many successes you get, downtime action to downtime action, you finish the project when you get through.
Yep.
Right? Recover. You have harm.
Yeah.
As an example. Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have stress.
You have stress. You don't have harm because you avoided harm. Right? So you both have stress, and that is indulge vice.
Right.
But you have no stress and you've indulged your vice. So you're good. Train. You could train in one of the, basically get XP. So where it says XP next to prowess and stuff like that.
Right.
You could train.
I got 3 XP over the course of the session.
Right. And reduce heat. You can have a little scene that helps you reduce heat, which of course, we're saying that Barsov's attitude, is directly involved in heat. Whatever his heat is, the heat on the crew makes him angry, right? And he's already a little peeved.
Although I thought my vice is obligation, so I feel like my getting off of stress is actually going to be doing some sort of thing with him to like kind of.
You feel obligated to Barsov. Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful, right? All right. So you want to indulge your vice, get rid of some stress. I'm assuming pensively approach, right? He is currently in the back room, right? Of the back room. There's a cold locker. Right. And of course he has somebody strung up. Right. And 2 of his goons are like, using this guy like a punching bag. And these guys make you look like a lightweight, he refers to them as Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. And they're just dumb as a bag of rocks, They just spend their days working out. That's all they do. Work out and beat people up. That's all they're there for. They're not part of the hit squad, right? They're
his goons.
And they're just goons. And they're barely his like bodyguards. Like they're not really smart enough to be bodyguards, just go do this. All right. So they're beating up this guy as you approach him.
I was actually thinking like, he knows I hate violence. Like, what if I offered to like finish the job on him? It'd be like, I know I made you angry the other day. Like, I would do this for you. Kind of like ask for his cudgel to like.
So sure. How about this? I think that you approach him, right, with a sort of a what can I do attitude. And he hands you the cudgel,
right,
and tells the 2 of them,
right,
and one of them, Tweedledummer, just kind of like looks at you and looks at the guy and like starts laughing and like walking away. Awesome. So you have to make this is great. Right. So you're going to make a vice roll. Indulge vice is when you indulge your vice, you clear some stress. You roll to find out. Oh, right. You roll your weakest quality.
Weakest quality?
Between insight, prowess, and resolve.
Okay.
So you're rolling 2 dice and taking the lowest.
Okay.
Now, and you can't do anything about this, right? And then it's basically your attribute roll using your lowest attribute rating. Clear stress equal to the highest die result.
Right.
Or in this case, the lowest die result.
So 1.
All right. So you clear 1 stress. By the way, Mark, if you happen to do this and you roll more than the stress you have, you have an overindulgence. And it has various effects. All right. So that you each get 2. I always go back and forth. What do you want your thing to be?
I think it's going to be train.
Train.
I think after that, I keep waking up and I know that the next encounter that I have, since I'm still in this world, I'm going to have to be really better prepared for.
Sounds good. So what do you want to train in? You basically train in one of those 3.
Oh, I should have asked you if my Bane of what's the name could have helped. The spiritual charm that I have.
Yes.
I should have asked. I should have asked that. Dang. It's double dangnatious. Anyway.
Well, it's funny. It's like, I think maybe that's what brings you out of the drowning.
Yeah,
right. Maybe
probably.
You grab it, and
that's the only thing I could grab.
Yeah.
What am I training? I'm training my knives.
If you want to train in skirmish, then you do prowess.
Okay, so I'll train in prowess.
Train in prowess. So how do you train? What's that? What's training?
I go back to the gym, and
there's a gym.
Yeah, that's where my bus.
Your pugilist buddy is.
What's the name? And I train there, and
you see, it's like a montage of varying things you're doing in the same.
Yeah.
Right. Gotcha.
I mean, I'm shaken after that. Conflict. I mean, that was not an idle.
Yeah. No. And I like the idea that maybe we see that
I'm still waking up sweats.
Like your pugilist friend sees that like catches you with a right hook.
Yeah.
And he's like, wake up, kind of idea.
And I'm just sitting there focused on that moment, sweating.
What's the next thing you want to do?
I mean, my stress is high as it is. Am I able to do stress twice?
Yes, I believe you can do the same downtime action.
Right. This time, instead of something harsh, I think I'd probably try to I don't know, what his favorite things are. Like if he has some favorite pastry or something, but where I'd bring it to him.
What does this look like for you?
Now, I don't know what his favorite thing is, but I would say I don't know, some favorite pastry or something that I can basically get him as a sign of
Oh, you want to maybe bring him something from outside the shop because he doesn't leave the shop.
Right, exactly.
By the way, the reason you only got 1 stress back last time is because it just felt terrible beating this.
Right. Yeah.
No. And he gets too much joy out of it for you to feel good about yourself.
Oh, I definitely didn't feel good about it.
All right. But maybe bringing him some sort of pastry, I think is really fun. It's a little more lighthearted, right? For this terrible thing. And go ahead, roll your dice.
2 3. So 3 is the.
All right. 3 is much better, right? Medium of the road.
Yeah.
All right. He softens up a little bit, right? But with a warning. Do you know what I mean? He, at one point in time, he just places his hand on the side of your head, and
Tony Soprano move.
Right? He says, we're obviously not going to continue with this right now, but he says something to the effect of,
we'll deal with this later.
You need to find him, right?
Right. I said we need to figure out how we can kill him because I put a bullet through his chest and I turned into a bunch of bats. So we're going to need to have some sort of strategy.
Everything is killable.
I hope you're right.
And he's looking at you.
Right.
Everything is killable. What do you want your second downtime action to be?
I'm going to go spend time with my auntie. See what I can learn from her.
Spend time with what?
My auntie.
Okay, but what do you want to work on? What of those things? It would be, that's great. We could use your auntie, but acquire asset, reduce heat, or train for you.
I guess reduce heat, right? Just,
lay low.
Just, help out her spiritual business.
That's awesome. Yeah. When she's legitimate, right? She's and
got a little spiritual shop. She's selling crystals.
Oh, right. That's awesome. Fantastic. So say what your character does to reduce heat, which is great. Make an action roll. Maybe you could use consort with your friend with a blue coat. Or maybe you command or feed the local citizens. What do you want to do?
I don't have consort or command. I have sway.
You have sway.
So
what do you want to sway?
Everybody
about
thinks that I'm a little bit calmer than I used to be. Just
maybe
little
put in a good word for me, Auntie, right?
Yeah. Ooh, I got a
6. There you go.
I mean, I did get the 3 originally. If it was only 1 die that I was supposed to roll. Was it supposed to be 2?
Don't roll until I tell you.
Okay. All right.
And it is sway, and you have 2 in sway, right?
Okay.
All right. So there you go. You rolled a 3 and a 6.
Okay.
So reduce heat according to the result. On a 6, you reduce heat by 3.
Okay.
So you guys go from 5 heat down to 2 heat.
Okay, that's good. Nobody's paying any attention to us now.
And there you go. That's Blades in the Dark.
Sweet.
This is absolutely in like my top 15 games.
Yeah. I definitely became fond of it, playing it.
I love the way that they go to the end scene, because I always try to begin my RPGs with something exciting. Like, I don't like we're meeting in a bar.
Yeah, like,
let's spend an hour getting in a bar. I hate that. So
if you do it like kind of in media res, like every time, or make it like that can get repetitive too, but it definitely works.
Right.
But like, even if it's something that's not action based, but some sort of hook to get started.
Well, like I said, you guys could have started in her room.
No, but I like this, because what I liked was the fact that you're like, okay, what's the end scene? And then you work your way to the end scene. I like that. And I feel like that there is more room for creativity. And you figure out the pockets. Like, well, in order for us to get that and to know what we're dealing with, we're going to have to talk to Agatha. Right. There's these logical. Yeah. And then like, well, now that I know that he's a spiritual dude, what am I going to have to do? So now I have to come up with the backstory of the auntie who can help me come up with the spirit being, whatever that was.
Yeah.
I liked your idea, Mark, that we'll play a game, cogitate on it, and then like we can talk about the game specifically. But just like debrief wise, like, do you feel, so the first thing is horror, right? What do you feel? Did you feel this being a horror game? And what do you feel like the elements of it, to deconstruct it a little bit?
I think the difference is than a traditional horror is that we were the hunters instead of being the hunted.
Right.
So I think in the context with which we're playing it, it makes sense.
Right.
But I did love the idea that, I think this is going to happen. And next thing I know, I'm in a completely different spiritual place where I'm drowning and then, out of control. And I've got the haunted thing, and I've got the stress increasing, and I've got, those pieces.
That's part of why I picked my character being not wanting to be in it, not wanting to be an assassin, even though, or hound, whatever. Like, because that adds to it more. Like, if he was like Artemis and Truri, I love killing like them, which worked with one character, but I feel like both of us were that way. It wouldn't have worked as much. So I just kind of.
What I tried to do there is have your boss be part of the horror.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, maybe top 3 favorite shows is Lovecraft Country. And the reason I love Lovecraft Country, have you seen it?
I've seen part of it. Yeah.
Oh, you seen it? One of the things I love is that, of course, it uses race, right? But what it does is the horror for the white people is all the supernatural stuff. Mm-hmm. And the black characters, their horror is reality, right? And they do, because really the black characters don't interact with the supernatural stuff in the same way. Mm-hmm. And really their horror is just the fucking world they live in. I just thought it was brilliant.
Kind of flip that a little bit at the end. But
they flip it a little bit at the end. And there's some things where and this is the second thing I want to talk about, is that usually one of the elements of horror is lack of control, right? And I think one of the things that's interesting to this is that a GM is allowed to push towards lack of control because the players always have the option to resist, right? Mm-hmm. And if you resist, it always succeeds. So he's in your brain, he's making you drown, right? You can resist that. You did. It gave you a trauma. It took you out of the action, but you chose to do that. And I think that's really important because no one really wants to lose control of their character,
right?
And my Cthulhu game that I hope we play, which is called Spiral. And also, I think it's called Cthulhu Light or Cthulhu Dark. I think it's called Cthulhu Dark to make fun of Cthulhu Light. is a small game by Graham Walmsley. And one of the things he does is like, I'm pretty certain it's this, is like, you say how you go insane. You know what I mean? Not you roll or the GM says how you go insane, right? And because that's such an important part of those kinds of games, right?
Yeah.
Is now you get to control your failure. You got to control your trauma entirely,
That's
right?
One of the things we could talk about too more is about the sort of passing of like who has agency in a situation.
Yes.
Different games carve it up different ways. Like I tend to like it like being sort of like where the each character is sort of like, you know, for the most part, the man of the player in their agency. But horror does kind of play against that in a way.
It does, but that's why I feel like you have to have social contract. And games like this, and really the game to really start it is Apocalypse World, where you have these hard, like the GM can only do certain things based on failure, right? And that's, I think, a really important thing. I think it's much easier for players to swallow the GM turning things up to 11 when you build on it, right?
Yeah.
And
I also
notice
think
I
it
don't.
relieves the GM of having to be everything to everyone. Like to a certain degree, like you said, like we were talking once, you were saying, being a GM, you know, failure isn't necessarily the end of the game. It's merely a branch in the tree. And and I do agree with that, but it also makes your job a little bit easier. Like if the person has to fill in the details of this is what my character's experiencing, then you can kind of say, well, what are you experiencing? And then like you're enjoying the scenery too, as much as the players are enjoying the scenery, instead of having to, I gotta come with something else.
Very important. Very important. Cool.
Like, but I will say though that I do think every now and then, you know, when a grenade goes off and somebody goes flying, they ain't exercising a whole lot of control there. You know, that's just the consequences of the role.
Absolutely. You know, there's an illusionism thing going on there where you're losing agency when you lose hit points.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And that this is just turning that idea into story.
Yeah, no, I like it. I thought it was
Instead of just I lose a number, right? Which to me, I don't know, it's not interesting.
A big,
Yeah. So cool.
No, that's really cool. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun. I like the world too. I was surprised because I didn't know if I like being confined into a city like that, but I thought that was kind of
worked really well.
Yeah.
The Cyberpunk campaign I was talking about, we've done almost entirely in Hong Kong.
Oh, that's
cool. It was kind of like a fancy Hong Kong,
right? Sure,
more gritty and stuff than Hong Kong actually is. But
right.
And I will tell you, the time that the characters in our Blades game stepped out of the city was really the worst time that they.
Oh yeah, no.
They're like, I don't want to be out here. That's another reason why I think this makes for a good horror game, and actually a pretty sustainable horror game. A lot of horror games, I think, are often not sustainable because after a while you're like, well, why is all this stupid shit happening? Or you become the cultists, right? You know, where this, everything is so horrific. Everything is like, well, this shit happens. It's, you know, there's always something to sort of some supernatural element with it still being mysterious.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's got, it has more of the kind of style of horror I tend to like, which is kind of more creepy than like, you know, jump scares or that sort of thing. I mean, obviously it's hard to do a jump scare in an RPG effectively, but
a cat. Oh, it's just a cat. Yeah.
The things that I thought was interesting in Blades were that you did were the bad guy. Like the bad guy, I thought like the lights, you know, where he goes, the light dims, you know, the impact that he had on his character, the fact that he trains her. Like it was interesting because we really didn't meet him directly. So that kind of aided in the, what are we dealing with here? You know, and that aided in the excitement of that confrontation, and even the confrontation at the end was, you know, that.
And also being under the thumb of our boss, kind of, at least for my character, was almost more of the horror than even, you know, our target in a way.
Yeah, so let's talk about Blades, and I'm with you. Let's talk about, like, pull it apart and say, first off, what do you guys think was going on in Blades in the Dark that's baked into Blades in the Dark that you feel makes it a good horror game?
Well, one thing, I mean, that occurred to me is, there was that kind of crime drama element to our story. And I think that might also come partially from the setting of Blades, but the system itself is very much, you're a crew, you're a gang. And I think it's a good intuition, I think, on your part to angle the horror in that direction, where it's kind of like horror plus Peaky Blinders or something like that,
the setting, I think, for sure was, even like the mushroom food. That was even that stuff, like, or the fungus world, or the things being the light being illuminated by those by mushrooms. Those were really interesting elements that I felt helped create a dystopian-esque environment, even though it's in 1870s or 1880s of a different world. I thought that was interesting. And then I thought the other piece that was interesting was the way the story gets told. Okay, we have this moment. How do we get to that moment? What took place before the climax of the story? And that, I thought, created like a really exciting level of attention. It creates excitement. Although it's interesting because that's kind of usually what you don't want to do in a horror story, is kind of tell the end before. It's like giving away the jump scare, right? But I don't think it works that way in an RPG. I think that's. Well, we had to come up with it. We had to come up with a way, like based on what the Crumbsy had laid out. Then we were like, okay, well, this is our attack plan, and that kind of, because now we're sitting there thinking about it, but we have to figure out how we get the pieces to get it to all unfold. And I thought that was part of the myth making, going back to that, like, oh, well, how did we get there? And then and because we don't know the outcome of it, like, it could have gone right, could have gotten eaten, or, the shot could have missed. I think that for me, I don't know. For me, it built a little bit of additional excitement going into the showdown.
Also, it's a simple mechanic, but the fact that stress is baked into the system is interesting. I think that we compared to our previous kind of game with Blades, I racked up almost a full thing of stress in one session.
So close.
I know.
So close to getting a trauma.
Yeah.
And interestingly, you could equate traumas in Blades in the Dark, which we didn't really approach yet. Mm-hmm. When you exceed your stress track, you get a trauma. And those traumas could definitely be mapped to something like, various maladies in Call of Cthulhu or anything to that effect, right? Like, it's very easy in Blades. First off, it's dark. It's Blades, the dark. Right. The fact that there's no sun immediately allows a mood, right?
Yep.
Although all games don't have to be this way, I definitely feel like Blades has this level of desperation built in, which definitely leads to a more horrific kind of thing. Like, you have to work for this guy, right?
Right.
You have to do these things. If you don't, you don't get to eat your mushroom gruel.
Right. Although one of those meta level things that kind of push on the story is we knew that we were playing a game that was going to be run for one session.
Yes.
So I could play it more like a horror thing and also be, a little less concerned about racking up stress. Whereas when we were playing an ongoing campaign, it's like, oh, every single point of stress. If I get so many of these things, he's out of the game forever.
Right. 4 traumas, you're done.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Although, I'll say that I am very lucky. And a lot of my players are willing, and not a lot of players are, but a lot of my players, because you're mine.
Yes.
A lot of the people that I game with are willing to, the sanctity of their character is not so important. One of our players is 100% happy to just jump into the deep end for the sake of conflict and story. Now, sometimes you're like, you don't want, it's not fun if you're just, constantly suicidal.
Well, no, it has to, this is the case where I think it's important for it to follow the character.
Right.
Like I had a friend who was playing a character in a very long running, cyberpunk campaign that was based in 2054 in Hong Kong mostly. And, his character ultimately kind of like basically kind of burned everything to like both kind of redeem himself and the group, but also in a way that like he knew it was going to kill his character, and it made sense for the character, it made sense for the scene, and like I love having players who are willing to do that.
Yeah.
But if it's just kind of like session one, like it's kind of becomes like I don't care, it's like the opposite of that. He cared a lot about his character, but to the extent where it made sense for his character to die that session.
Right. And then, and to feed into what you were saying before, those short form games, there's a lot less of that investment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to have really pretty good players and gamers to be willing to like jump right in, and then on top of that, be like, I'm playing a horror game.
Yeah.
I know that I'm expendable, but I'm still going to play my character to the end.
Yeah, but I do think that that's one of the things that distinguishes a game like Cyberpunk, D&D, or what's versus a horror game, which is that listen, we know that your character getting killed is a much higher probability in a horror game, and you should accept that earlier on than being all upset when it happens to you, because there are games where people get very upset that you kill off their character. Yeah, but you can't do that in a horror.
Character death will be an entire episode.
Yeah, actually, I was saying before that I never had a session where something was needed to be pre-explained, and actually I just realized that was one thing, because I did run a campaign once where it was a dark setting. It was a kind of grim dark setting, fantasy. And like, so I assumed that, character death was a possibility. And one of my players got really, not like angry, but like, I could tell he was kind of like put off by the fact that his character died in the second session.
Yeah.
And that's such a line to cross, because you don't want, we have one friend of ours who basically is like, all right, well, his twin brother shows up, like you don't want them to de-invest because of that.
Right.
You want those to be important moments.
Right.
And again, character deaths will be an entire episode.
Right. Yeah.
It's a thing. So the darkness, the setting, the desperation, the stress, right?
The stress is fun.
Stress mechanic is definitely a trope of horror, right? There's certainly stress in Aliens, which we're going to play. There's a level of that in Hunter. We're going to see a game that a lot of the games we play will have this level of, at what point in time are you no longer in control of yourself?
Right. Because that's, that reflects reality. Sure. I mean, I don't think you can have a game where, it's not a hero story. Ours are not hero stories. So you can have your hero, I charge, yes, I take that hit, and then I charge for it with my broadsword. That's not what happens.
It would be kind of interesting to approach a horror game where it's like, okay, we're playing this horror game, we have a party of people, and from the outset, only one of you's coming out of here, right? And that, just baked right in.
Yep.
So that's cool. Now, so what do you feel like then are the elements that were brought into Blades that are not baked into Blades that you felt made it a horror game?
I thought the tone you set, the tone you set, or the narrative that you set with the characters, with, my character had ill intent towards Agatha. So I was surprised that, Agatha broke down and was like, that was a nice little plot twist for me. And that was a nice little surprise. I thought the tone you set with the dude, the bad guy, was also effective.
Like, so I always go for the whole Hitchcockian idea that it's better to know the bomb is under the table. Like I think you feed the players the information. You were going into this whole thing. In fact, if you think about it, Blade's whole setup is actually really good for horror, right? Because what it does is it builds tension. You went into that whole setup knowing this was probably a vampire, right? You learned it through various things, but you're like, but before you even faced him, you're like, shit, we're facing a vampire.
You're also in a setting where like him being
vampires exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So, but I will say Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think that's another part for the player, not necessarily the character. The player needs to not necessarily automatically go, it's a vampire and they have 46, hit points and all. Like, it's better to let the story unfold and not for you to try to identify the monster, because as soon as you know what it is and what you're dealing with, there's some of the magic is lost.
So I think that's a really critical point in how mechanics feed into a genre.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I am not here to badmouth the game. But
maybe we'll have a session about that sometime.
Right.
It'll all out in one.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you remove mystery, when things are so well defined, right? That I think that's part and parcel to a genre like horror, right? Blades feeds itself to horror because really, how well or poorly this goes down determines whether or not you roll a 6 or not, right? So you roll a 6, you're like, all right, I'm going to get what I want. And the GM doesn't get to, right? It's very important. The GM doesn't get to push the horror buttons when I roll 6s.
Right.
But if, God forbid, you roll a 4 or 5 or, a 1 or a 2 or a 3, then shit's going down, right? And you don't get that with a lot of games where players, particularly good players who are very gamist, who, want to be good at the game, which is great. To be good at Blades, knowing anything about what the stats, and
there's only so much you can game at with the stats.
Doesn't mean anything. In fact, it probably even, oh crap, I don't want to face that.
Right.
But and one of the things that goes on with some of these games is the idea that you're using flashbacks to build what are its weaknesses. All right, if I roll successfully, I can establish it as a weakness to garlic. And that's a big triumph we have, right? Yep. But yeah, so I do think that those mechanics become really critical in telling that kind of story. Right. I will say I have had very successful, and I think you have too, Jamie, successful horror games with something like Curse of Strahd.
Yeah. But
when you're dealing with Ravenloft, they have to change the mechanics of the game. Yeah. Right? To me, Dark Sun is a horror set. I can make Dark Sun a horror setting, or at least survival horror. And it's a world where the sun is trying to kill you. Like the world is trying to kill you. And you can really lean into that. Right.
You have been listening to another episode of the Modern Mythology podcast. We hope we gave you something new to think about that you can bring to your RPGs, writing, and other character-based games and art forms. Produced by James Kershaw. Soundtrack by Scott Landis and James Kershaw. For more information about this episode, articles, or links to our other related projects, visit modernmythology.net.